Satnam, yogis and yoginis, hello and welcome back to the channel. Today we have a new video, we have a conversation with Hari Darshan Kaur. And thank you, Hari Darshan, for coming. I know you're very busy and I'm glad that we are going to be having this conversation today. Welcome.
Satnam, Ardaas, it's great to be here.
So Hari Darshan, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I am originally Palestinian, brought up in Canada, educated between Canada and the UK, and have been living in Dubai for the last 25 years. I began my career in sort of diplomacy and then the corporate world, but for the last 17 years have been on a journey of integrative healing and have really been blessed to find the teachings of Kundalini yoga, and also so many other emotional intelligence techniques, somatic therapies, and technologies that complement my existing practice, and have been a trainer of Kundalini yoga for several years, and actually now hundreds, even thousands of practitioners have come through the platform that I founded called Darshan here in Dubai. And it's exciting. It's exciting to actually watch wellness flourish in the Arab world, to actually watch Kundalini yoga grow in the Arab world, and to see just this amazing blossoming of wonderful teachers across the region.
What does Darshan mean?
Darshan means vision of the beloved, and it's really it's the inspiration actually comes through my spiritual name. But the idea and the essence of it is really just to tune into that. How do we tune into it? What are the tools that we have in our lives to keep us in the remembrance that we're more than just our conceptual thinking mind, that we're more than just the sum of our thoughts, but we're spirits in this human form. And I feel that darshan is almost like a remembrance of that and helps us stay in the remembrance of that.
You know, I remember reading how traditionally in India, a guru could initiate a student in three ways. One would be he would come when you are sitting still and he would whisper a mantra in your ear. And one would be by touch. Maybe he would touch your crown and awaken your Kundalini. And the other one would be through vision, through seeing, through the eyes. So I feel like Darshan is connected to that as well, like an initiation. So what initiated you in this path? From diplomacy, right? How did you move into the yoga world?
So I had always been practicing yoga. I mean, always. I would say I think I began in my early 20s. So that was many years ago when I was at university. And I began with a Hatha and Shivananda practice and became very active, loved it. It was much more of a physical practice for me. I didn't really understand the depths of it when I began. And in sort of 2006, 2007, after my third child was born, I was still working in the corporate world and really doing extremely well, sort of career-wise, but feeling like I was on the verge of a burnout. And at that time, I sort of decided to take a time out. And during that period, I went on a little bit of a journey. And that journey took me down many different routes and paths around my own healing, understanding myself. There was also tension in my marriage, and so we went into some inquiries, my husband and I, at the time, to deepen our connection, to understand what our, let's say, conflicts were about, and to ride the tide of having this growing family. And around that time, a friend called me and she said, there's a teacher in Dubai. She's kind of been here for a very short time. She's sort of transiting through Dubai, but she teaches this school of yoga called Kundalini Yoga. And you've got to try it. I've heard such great things. And I said, amazing. I would love to. I was so open at the time and I wanted to experience new things. And I invited this teacher to come to my garden. And I had my first experience
Who was the teacher?
her name is Unkarpreet Kaur. She lives now in Australia. Uh, her legal name is Haley. She was a beautiful teacher, really a beautiful teacher. She's not so active anymore, but at that time, something sparked. So I asked her to keep coming. I said, would you be happy to come use my garden, bring whoever you want? I just want to experience more of this amazing practice. And that's what happened. And that's how I began my practice. And it was this beautiful teacher who nudged me at the time to do a training. And I said, what for? I'm not interested. Why would I want to do a training? I'm just so happy being a student. I'm so happy with this beautiful practice. I'm so happy with you coming to my garden. Why change any of that?
Yeah.
And I now understand why. I went on that path, and I met some incredible teachers along the way. Daran Singh being one of those beautiful souls, and the rest is history. I just went deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, and realized that actually one of the best ways to share this technology is to train teachers.
Yeah, I mean, the position of being sitting in the garden and listening to somebody is very comfortable, right? It's nice and cozy, and in a way we're always students, but this world needs teachers. If we don't become teachers, we are just taking. No, it's like this concept I was reflecting upon in another video here in the channel about how in the early stages of life we are receiving many things, like from our parents. They are taking care of us, then our teachers are instructing us and educating us, and we are taking. And that mentality, which is this taking mentality, if we don't grow out of it, we carry on during the mature years, even into elderhood. How do you say elder? Being, an elder, I don't know.
Elder years, yeah.
Elder years, and we keep on taking. We want to more, no? We want to go higher in the structure of the company or whatever, but always like taking more, and that's a recipe for not dissatisfaction in life. By the end of life, you will feel like, well, what did I do with my life? Just taking, no? And there was a good recipe for death. And actually, I think this came out of a conversation about death, actually. And I was suggesting this question: the last day of your life, if you're about to die on your deathbed, what should have happened for you to depart in peace? Now, this is a question we do in Karam Kriya from Shiv Charan, right? This is the kind of question that Shiv Charan does. And then whatever answer you give, what has to have happened for me to depart in peace, you can check if that answer contains some way of giving. So if you have given something, then this is probably a real answer that is really going to bring you peace. And therefore, that's something you can aim for. And that becomes your purpose or your objective in life. If it doesn't have this giving, there's something missing. Because at the end of the life, hopefully we have been giving, no? So when you were comfortably sitting in the garden and suddenly, you were confronted to, no, why don't you, become the teacher or the trainer? That's kind of like the turning point. Okay, I'm going to stop receiving this beautiful thing, and then I'm going to start sharing with others, right?
That's so beautiful, and it's so beautifully put. It's so true, because it is somehow a graduation from being, the first half of our life. So much of our life is spent accumulating, and especially in those early years, accumulating wealth, knowledge, wisdom, assets, children, partners, etc. And if the next half of our life is not spent giving and sharing all that we've accumulated, there's a disconnect. And this is, I think, what is known as midlife crisis.
Right.
So ideally, if we can get to that place earlier in life and bring in that balance, I think we're at far less risk of having that conflict in midlife. And definitely, I didn't really understand what it meant to become a teacher. I love this philosophy of teach to master, is that it's not just about, sitting on the mat and, master yourself, master who you are, learn who you are, get curious about who you are, take that journey to self-actualization to another level. Every time I sit on a platform, to this day, I, I'm challenged when I have to prepare for a group, whether it's content for a group, a class for a group, to hold space for a meditation. It doesn't matter. All of that is actually helping me to reflect on who I am within the driver's seat of my life. And at the same time, there's something beautiful that happens when we step out of the neuroses of me, uh, and just show up for others. That is so beautiful and so intelligent, and actually such a deep, deep healing space for the teacher. Yeah.
So, how interesting. I'm thinking about, let me just say for context for the viewers that Hari Darshan invited me last year to teach in Dubai, in her home. And it was a great experience. I had never been to Dubai, and it was quite my first contact with the Middle East. And it was very interesting. And as you are speaking, I'm considering, because Dubai looks like a very new city, like a very young city. And we are talking about this perspective of a human being going through the early life and then becoming an adult and hopefully coming out of the middle age crisis in a different way and facing the direction of sharing rather than receiving. And so if we take that analogy with the city itself, Dubai itself, and when I arrived, it was like, what's this? All these big buildings. And it can feel like they are accumulating, and let's get bigger and higher and taller and, even more buildings and higher. And afterwards, I was looking at, was it in Saudi Arabia? They were trying to do this the line, like a very high wall building. I'm not building, but like the mile. No, how is it called? I don't remember, but it was like,
Yeah, yes.
how is it called?
I think it's Neom that you're referring to.
Oh,
Neom.
I don't know where, but it's like a very high and very long line in the desert, and it would be a city, and there would be people living.
Yeah, Neom.
Neom, yeah, that's the name. So a lot of these, particularly, let's come back to Dubai. It feels like accumulating, no? And yet, you were just sending me a few articles before we had this conversation about how, in a way, Dubai is waking up to this other side of the spirituality and inviting all these teachers and doing these festivals. And you have been there for so many years already. So can we maybe tell us? Do you feel that there has been a shift, or there is a shift happening right now? And is there a possibility for, this prosperity that has arrived into Dubai and maybe the zone, that they are now seeing, what do we do with this? Not just accumulate, but how can we do something with this and share something out of that?
It's a great question. It's a super question, actually, because when I first started practicing and even teaching, I think there were probably 2, maybe 3 centers, yoga centers in the whole of Dubai. And I don't think many of them were interested in Kundalini yoga, except for one. And that's where I began a regular teaching practice. And even then, yoga as a concept, yoga as a philosophy, as a lifestyle, was still in its infancy. People didn't really understand. They couldn't differentiate between the fact that it was more than just a physical practice. And so there was a whole kind of education process that began in those early years. Slowly, more Ashtanga, more Hatha, and very gradually, deeper practices, and what I call maybe a little bit more holistic practices like Kundalini yoga that combine the Shakti and the Bhakti and the Raj spirit of yoga. And we've seen, again, an evolution of kirtan in the space. And something really interesting is happening here. And it's happening here for different reasons. Okay, so the first thing is the fact that regionally there aren't many places that work that are high functioning. So I say the Arab world can be divided into 3 sub-regions. You've got the Gulf, so Gulf countries like the UAE, where Dubai sits, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar. You've got the Levant, which is made up of places like Lebanon, Syria, Palestine, Jordan, Iraq, and North Africa, which is Morocco, made up of Morocco, Tunisia, and Algeria. Egypt is kind of floating between all of these. And you look at this region and it's enormous. But how many places in this region are actually high functioning? And for so many different social reasons, political reasons, economic reasons. So Dubai has become a hub first and foremost for the region. So let's look at that. That's very, very interesting. And you've got these 3 sub-regions that are somehow interconnected and interrelated. So that's the first thing. The second thing I would say is that this growth and this expansion, because of the visionary leadership of this country, was inevitable. And like a little child, in a way, I love this kind of it's like, oh my God, we are. And one thing I didn't speak about, sorry, I'm going to rewind,
Go.
is that we are at the doorstep of India and the subcontinent, the Asian subcontinent. So you're
Right.
talking about this mega force of energy also that makes it interesting from a geographical point of view. So what I wanted to say was, this realization that Dubai had as it began to run out of oil, because Dubai doesn't directly have oil wealth. The oil wealth actually is from Abu Dhabi and from the rest of the Gulf that actually has contributed to so much of the prosperity here, yes, but directly Dubai took the decision several years ago to diversify its economic development away from oil. So that meant that Dubai was like, okay, let's just try everything. Let's just try everything. Let's see what's possible. Like that child, walking into a candy shop, can we become a financial hub? Oh, how interesting. Can we become a hub for art and music and literature? Oh, how interesting. We can go down that road. Can we build really tall buildings and make them the tallest in the world? Yes, we can. And there was this playfulness in a way about Dubai suddenly becoming this place where so many things were possible because of its geographic importance, because of the prosperity of wealth in the region, and because of the visionary leadership. So it was almost like, okay, you want to build an island in the sea? Let's do it. You want to build the tallest building? Let's do it. Let's try it. You want to build an airline that is really a fantastic airline, one of the biggest in the world? Let's do it. And it was very much this we can do it attitude. Let's just not hesitate. This country doesn't have, the land doesn't have a lot of baggage. It was a country of nomads and desert people, really. And that also lack of baggage made it possible to take this leap into this unknown place and for it to be catapulted into this huge success story, which is this, playful. There's something playful about Dubai. There's something childlike about Dubai. There's a feeling of anything is possible here. And I think with that kind of energy, inevitably, you will have things swinging to one end of the pendulum, and the pendulum of extremes, where this will lead to people wanting to come and exploit Dubai, wanting to take from Dubai, wanting to build things that perhaps are not in the country. It's all about opportunity. It's like let's take, right, from this amazing childlike energy that Dubai offers. And while that's happening, there is this risk of it becoming literally a marketplace for everything.
Right.
And in the yoga world, uh, at risk of becoming um, a spiritual marketplace to the extreme, and a spiritual junkyard if it's not careful. Because everything is possible here. And so people all over the world are saying, okay, wow, curious, interesting. Let's see, can we make this work? Can we try this here? Can we? And that's what's happening. You have people coming to, in a way, dive into this childlike, playful energy, this energy of possibility. And many things will be tried and tested as a result.
So
I wanted, please.
I'm taking your image and let me expand it a little bit and let me bring a little bit of numbers because we both love numbers and sometimes I talk about numbers here in the channel, but I find it very interesting that you refer to Dubai as being in the middle of three major points: the Gulf, the Levante, and the North Africa. And so there is this triangle, right, between these 3 points, and you're in the middle. Like thinking also like I'm an engineer, so I see the triangle and the point in the middle. I'm thinking, well, look at the triangle. Triangle is 3, and 3 is like the third chakra is the fire, and the fire and the earth are very connected. And you have the sun and you have the desert. So how incredible this energy of the desert and the sun and this fire, and this nothing grows in the desert, but then appears in the center, that appears a little oasis. And then in this oasis, all these people see that they can, go there and find water. In a way, when they go to the oasis, they bring their goods and they bring their things that they share, that they have, and then they can share it with each other and maybe sell it to each other. That's the marketplace that it's becoming, no? And but then that oasis becomes very rich, and maybe I just say it doesn't have oil to buy, it comes from Abu Dhabi or the region, but in a way they found something valuable in Dubai, that they can come and they can meet others because this is the hub, the central hub, no? So I can imagine that this child that is growing now, that is becoming an adolescent, maybe even a mature adult, it's coming into that. Before, you were saying before, how about instead of waiting for the midlife crisis, can we meet it before that? No, so can we help Dubai to transform into a mature Dubai before having to go through this crisis? And that would mean that taking consciousness of what they are, the role that they play, the role that you play, Dubai plays within the region, and then having this wonderful thing that all these people are converging into this place, that's a great opportunity. Now, of course, as an opportunity, some people will come, and even within the spirituality, they will come with wanting to take from Dubai. No, there's deep pockets. So let's go there. Let's organize a festival and let's charge. And these are how do you say? Like extraordinary amount of money because people will pay it, and that's why we go there and we take things from them. But rather than that, can we find all this wealth, all this prosperity, all these oases? Is the water. There's nothing richer than the water. So can we find a different way to share what already has? So how do you experience this? How do you see yourself? You've already been for many years. Now you are seeing a waking up of all these festivals and things that are trying in a way to, let's find a new market. And you are seeing this child growing somehow. So how is your position in this? How is it experienced?
Yeah, so people ask me all the time, that place, that really energetic place, Dubai, how can you be there? How can you stay there? You doing what you do and representing what you represent. And actually, my life exists between literally the beach and my garden and a few of my favorite places. And I do have an incredible view of the Burj Khalifa, which is the tallest tower in the world, from my garden. But, I know it's there, and it is there, and the pulse is there. But somehow I bring my own pace to that. That makes sense. There is a gentle, subtle footprint of my life that is not busy with what is going on all the time in Dubai. This like super, super high energy. And I pick and choose where I teach. I pick and choose where I go to socialize. I pick and choose when I'm on the road, even. And from that point of view, I'm very mindful of the space. When I get invited to share something, and it could be in a corporate context, it could be in a festival context, it could be in any kind of teaching or speaking context, I really do everything that I can to bring what I experience or what I perceive to be something authentic, something real. I don't try to be anything that I'm not. And when I talk about anything that I do, whether it's about the active counseling that I do or the Kundalini yoga that I teach, I really do it from a very, very human space. And I try to do it as well from a space of, hey, we're all human, we're all here, kind of doing our thing. And as long as we adhere to the truth of who we are, there, we have less chance of creating conflict in our life. So for me, even though all of this is happening all the time, I think energetically, I just feel like just stay focused on your mission, which is to keep showing up first and foremost to myself, my first sadhana, also to my family, and then to my community. And if around that things get built and happen, I make space for them, but I'm not sort of actively pursuing, grabbing, looking, yearning, knocking on people's doors with that energy. So it's more of an energy of make space, make peace with yourself, continue to just keep your head down and do what you do. And if something is meant to come your way, it will. And honestly, that is how I have operated for so many years. And things come to me, and they come to me. And sometimes they come to me, and I know that I'm not meant to participate. And sometimes they come to me and it's like, wow, okay, this is a beautiful invitation. And I really feel called to be there.
Right.
I don't know if that even answers the question, but
No, but I get it. I get it. It's like you are your own center and you run a center, right? And you are the own center of, even within that center, that oasis, you have your own center there. And yeah, I was just reflecting how, because I've been to your house, I've seen the views, I've seen the beautiful tower up there, and I was considering how in the olden times, in a town, you would build the biggest building was the church. I'm thinking Europe. I'm not sure about in other countries if it was the same or not, but at least in Europe, you would always find the church because it's the biggest town in the city, in the town, the biggest building in the town. Sorry, and that's the reference of God, right? God is there, and so and your name, Darshan, yeah, the vision of the beloved. How interesting, no? You're seeing this huge tower, which in a way used to remind us about God, because the tower is about getting high, getting into the ethers, if you wish. So in a way, even though it may become a symbol for something else, the idea of building a very high building, it was the same, it was something spiritual as well. And there is a spiritual awakening now in the city, very much like a young kid becoming an adolescent is waking up to him or herself and realizing that there is something divine. And first they have to go into the ego phase of renouncing God and trying to pull away from everything. And I guess Dubai, even though it's is Muslim city, they have the Islam is very much in the skin of the buildings, but they are very flexible about their own religion, so flexible enough that they can attract all these people from the outside. So this is like the young kid who goes to church and says, well, I don't know about this priest, I don't know what he's saying. So he goes out and behind the priest and goes to the little image of Mary and goes directly to that, no? So I don't know about the religiosity of Dubai itself, but I know that it's waking up to spirituality. So, and I'm not trying to say that spirituality was not in the religion, because there is. And also, if we're thinking about money and sharing, but the first training I did in Egypt, that Shamakor invited me, and I remember I was teaching about prosperity, and there's this exercise that we do with in the trainings. Well, I do sometimes. I ask sentences that students remember about money. And when you come to Spain, you have sentences like, money doesn't bring you happiness, you cannot buy happiness, and things in which you connect money with something evil. And so there is like a very negative attitude towards money. And there is the concept of giving a 10% of your income to the people who need it. When I went to Egypt, I was really confronted by the attitude of prosperity, seeing money, that is something good about it. And actually the sharing is not 10%, it's a 30%. No? and I guess that's very connected to the Muslim community. And so there is a great generosity within that community. And that is also, as I'm thinking about this idea that Dubai is like accumulating, but in a way, the very culture is about sharing as well. So I guess this is going to happen, no? But which form is it going to take? And that's why spirituality now comes in in the form of yoga and other practices. But is it going to be like a spiritual marketplace? Is it going to be like in the West, is every teacher with their yoga mat and you can go there and you can give your money? Or is it going to be something that when you go there is these teachers who are going to be sharing? I don't know what's going to happen with that.
But this is really interesting. You touched on something really beautiful, which is giving back. And one thing that really inspires me about living here and also about the Islamic faith is that one of the 5 pillars of Islam is zakat. Zakat is really giving back. And every year, actually, it's such an innate part of the culture. It's barely even spoken about. It's just there. It's there. And of course, during the holy month of Ramadan, we have this, these days when we pay extra special attention to the laborers, people who toil to build these really tall buildings. We make sure to give back to communities in need. So of course, Dubai is a place with a lot of prosperity, but then we have on our doorsteps places like Palestine, Lebanon, that are enduring all kinds of conflict, war, and so forth. And so there are a lot of people in need. There are hospitals in Abu Dhabi and Dubai that have taken people from these war zones, children, orphans, and so forth. I was invited to a talk the other day. I wasn't in the country, but where we have, for example, sort of founders of major charities in the region come, speak, remind us. So this presence of possibility is always there. So there is always this reminder somehow in the background that yes, there's this playfulness and there's this energy and everything is possible. But at the same time, let us not forget that we can give back, and reminders in so many different forms. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, and again, if you're tuned into it, you're tuned into it. So for me, it's just very much part of my everyday life. And these are the conversations I have and the people that I work with. And in my life, this is central. But if I want to get busy with something else, what I call the Starbucks culture or the McDonald's culture of spirituality, because Instagram and the ads are
Yeah.
trying to, get me to buy that Big Mac or get me to buy that, coffee or whatever it is. If I'm getting busy all the time with that distraction and that diversion, then I'm not making space for the possibility of really what this place has to offer, which is all the goodness as well, all this amazing just spiritual energy that is sitting right underneath it all, that may not be on the surface, but if you give enough presence to it, is available to you. So yeah, if I want to get busy with Starbucks and McDonald's, I can, and it's there, and I will. And I can get busy with it on every level of my life. But if I make space, if I bring presence, true presence into my life, if I really tune into what's available here, I mean, my neighbor is a Booker Prize nominee. One of my best friends is a filmmaker, doing incredible things in the film world to tell stories, challenging stories, and stories, for example, of the Palestinian people. Um, would all of this have been possible without a place like Dubai? I don't know. There are people doing. My neighbor across the street, who's a Kundalini yogi, is a Kazakh designer, who has brought her brand of linen clothing to another level because she's come to Dubai. So I feel, and they're all doing amazing things in their own right. And somehow there is this energy of possibility, but if we can rein it in with another energy of presence, of true presence, of making space, then it's a very exciting place from a spiritual point of view. It can be. It can be.
I really like the way you express that and the way you move your hands as you were expressing it, because there was this movement of something coming down into your heart and then going forward. This feeling, that was really great. I was making a video in nature yesterday. That was the first time I was doing a video in the forest, and I would like to do more in this year. And I was talking about how we have the lower chakras and the higher chakras, and how often do we either we go into the lower chakras and it becomes like an addiction, or you break the lower chakras and it becomes like a repression. And it can be anything regarding first, second, or third chakra. So it could be sexuality, but also food and things like that. It can be an addiction, or it can be a repression. You can be closing it down. And then when we go into the higher chakras, we generally go out like escaping the material. So meditating like an escape, like a holidays from the world, because the world is too difficult. So I'm just gonna meditate to escape. And that's like a karmic attitude. But the yogi is not the one who is like repressing emotions, pretending to be very holy and escaping up, but it's actually into being in the heart and then taking the wisdom within our instincts, our animal instincts from the lower chakras, and refining it and ascend that into the heart, and then calling for something to come down from the divine and then projecting forward. So this idea of your hand, of something that was coming into your heart and moving forward, that was very, very not explicit way to convey it, no? And I appreciate that you always speak from your heart. I can hear the heart in your voice. So that was lovely, very nice.
Thank you. That's beautiful.
Let,
That's
let
beautiful.
me let me ask something as well. So this generosity and this sharing, that is one of these 5 pillars of the Islam, that I guess that's one thing that helps when you are bringing this philosophy of yoga to the Muslim world? Because, well, I mean, yoga is very accepted in the Christian world. Let's say you can be a Christian and you can be a yogi or yogini. That's absolutely no problem. But I can imagine that it's not so easy for the Muslim world. It's not so. It's quite new. It's not so. It doesn't have so much experience like with the Christian world and maybe even other religions. So I wonder what are the ways that the Muslim culture tunes in with yoga very, very well, like this one of these 5 pillars. I'm actually curious about the other 4. And then what are the challenges that you find in communicating and sharing with Muslims to let them know that you can be a yogini or a yogi and you can be a Muslim anyway. It's not a conflict.
So, I mean, the first thing that I would say is most Muslims have as a value regular prayer. And not just, we pray in the Christian tradition, before meals or in the mornings or in the evenings, but literally several times a day. Okay, so 5 times a day, you stop everything that you're doing, or you're intended to stop everything that you're doing, and you pray. And wherever you are in Dubai, even with all these tall buildings and all this possibility and all this spirituality and all this stuff that's happening, you will hear the mosque, okay, at key times throughout the day. And it's an invitation, it's a call to prayer. It's a call to prayer.
And may I just share something here? Because being there, you were explaining to me how in this moment when the bells ring and the word of the I don't know what's the name, the guy who starts speaking in the microphone and everybody hears.
The imam.
The imam, yeah. When the call is coming, everybody goes in and they all take off your shoes and they all go and bow down at the same level. So whether you are in the toppest of the building or you are in the lowest part of the building, whether you are building the building or wherever you are, they all go down to the same level, no? Very interesting.
So 2 things happen actually. There's the call, there's the invitation a few minutes before the actual prayer. So it's like, the invitation, everybody come to pray. And it's the announcement that the prayer is about to happen. So that gives people time to stop everything that they're doing and to get to their prayer mat or to get to the mosque or to pause whatever it is that they're doing. It's remembrance. And this is what I call what we refer to in the teachings as Simran. Simran, remember that you are more than just your physical body, that you're more than just your mind, but your spirit. Satanam, Satanam. This is the remembrance of the spiritual identity. And it is so inbuilt through the prayer system, through the pillars, this idea of remember who you are, remember your spiritual identity. And not just that the actual form that the prayer takes is physical. It's very physical. So of course, in many traditions, we get on our we get on our knees. A lot of the great faith traditions require us to kneel. But in Islam, literally you get on a prayer mat and you place your forehead to the mat. You're connecting your third eye to the earth. If that's not yogic, I don't know.
And to the earth, to the desert, to the desert energy.
So it's so intelligent. It's so intelligent and it's so built in already. I've led trainings where throughout the day, some of my students leave, like they will step out. They just walk out of the training to pray. They come back, or they weave the prayer into their practice. But when people come to me and they ask me, is there a conflict, between my religious beliefs and I remind them, actually, the conflict actually is in us. We create the conflict. Yoga is just meant to bring us closer to that connection with the divine. And, we chant mantras in our, in the traditions of Kundalini Yoga, Satanam, Ramadasa, Ad Sach, Jugad Sach, all of these beautiful mantras that come from from sacred texts of really Indian culture, of Sikhi, etc. If somebody says to me, but when I go deep into my meditative practice, I hear the vibration of Allah, or La ilaha illallah comes into my vibration, I say to them, let it be there. I mean, don't force anything else. If that's what's coming to you, then that's what's coming to you.
You don't have to
And
chant Satnam. You
you know,
can vibrate with your own sound of Allah. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. So it's just a beautiful merger, yoga to yoke, the union between the mind, the body, and the spirit, between the finite and the infinite, between the seen and the unseen. It's it's like, okay, can we just all agree that there are things that we can't see? Can we all agree that there is a vibration? You want to call it Allah, God, the great love, whatever it is, but there's something. And there's something bigger than us, and we can't necessarily articulate it with the limitations of this finite mind, but we can experience it.
Mm.
We can experience it through the breath, through the body, through the mantra, and people just somehow get it. And maybe because I've never experienced the conflict, I feel very comfortable being in a mosque, in a church, in a Hindu temple, in a Sikh temple. I have no conflict. And so when I teach and when I invite people to experience the practice, it's exactly that. It's invitational, it's self-initiation, it's whatever you experience is yours.
You
It's
know,
welcome.
it's amazing. You were saying this how you can be in the middle of a group of people and suddenly somebody says, oh, I'm just going to pray for a few minutes and then come back. And I'm thinking that how healthy is that? How beautiful is that? Because that would be very weird to do it here in the West. I mean, if you are with a group of friends having a dinner or something, it is very acceptable to say, I'm going to go smoke a cigarette, go outside for 5 minutes and come back. But if I say, I'm just going to go meditate or pray for a few minutes, and then you come back, they would be looking at you like you are crazy. They're so like from another world. But so that's already ingrained in their culture, and that's another of the 5 pillars, right? So one was the sharing, and the other one was the prayer, right?
So yeah, prayer is a big one. Prayer, and 5 times a day prayer.
Right.
Shahada, faith, to actually have, to declare that faith in Allah. Fasting, and fasting is a big one. For 1 month every year, people fast during Ramadan, and it's a beautiful time, whether people are very religious or not. Most people I know fast. And it's just a beautiful thing. It's a time to purify, time to cleanse, time to make space. And of course, the pilgrimage, which is Hajj. And Hajj is to go to the sacred sites, to go and visit at least once in your life, to Mecca. This is again one of the pillars. So
Sorry, is that the same pillar, the one of fasting and going to a sacred place, or these are two different
yeah,
pillars?
so it's a separate pillar. So
Oh,
fasting is one pillar, and going to a sacred place, going to Mecca is another pillar.
right,
That's called
right.
Hajj. Hajj. So so it's very, very beautiful. It's very, very beautiful that these pillars are just kind of there, always in the background. And that the faith and the prayer practice and the zakat are highly complementary to really the essence of all yoga, the philosophy of all yoga. There is no conflict. It is just a beautiful, beautiful marriage of the same
Mm,
body of teachings that are meant to bring us back into our essence.
nice. Oh, I'm loving this. I'm enjoying. Hari Darshan, what is the fifth pillar then?
So we have Shahada, which is faith. Okay, we'll just go through them together. Shahada, which is faith. Hajj, which is the pilgrimage. Zakat, which I spoke about earlier, which is the giving. Salah, which is prayer. And Som, which is fasting. Fasting, that's 5 pillars.
Oh, say them again then.
So Hajj, which is pilgrimage.
Pilgrimage.
Som, which is fasting. zakat, which is giving, prayer, which is salah, and shahada, faith. 5.
Oh, so prayer and the faith are two different ones.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
So that's the 4 and 6 and the 5 and 10, I guess. Did you put
Mm.
them into numbers? No.
I've played with them, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because 1 and 9 would be the place, right? There would be the sacred places. And the 2 and
Exactly.
8 would be the fasting, I guess. The 3 and 7 would be the giving and I mean, it's not kind of, it's like positive mind, I guess, no? and
Yes, yes.
the 4 and 6 would be the faith, and the 5 the prayer, because that's actually in the voice, the faith
Yeah.
into the voice, no?
Yes.
Yeah, that makes a
Yes.
lot of sense. So I can see how that aligns so well with the yogic teachings, that those are positives for you to communicate to the Muslim community about how you can do yoga and be with your own faith. Now, what are the challenges on teaching in a Muslim country? I believe
Um,
it's illegal, right? Right now?
Look, in places like Saudi Arabia, yoga, yoga, not necessarily Kundalini yoga, yoga was only made legal in 2018. Okay, so we're
2018.
talking 2018. Yeah. So
That's
yoga
last
was,
night.
yeah, exactly. Yoga was completely illegal until 2018.
Gosh.
But then again, many other things were illegal in Saudi Arabia. Um, and it's been a gradual evolution of educating people about what yoga is. And of course, in order to create that educational space, the understanding was much more heavily focused on the physical practices, the asana practice of yoga, as opposed to the philosophy
Right.
and understanding and so forth. Kundalini yoga, because of its emphasis on some mantra practices, is not so open. Let's just say it's not so understood in places like Saudi yet. So when I teach in Saudi, I'm always a little bit more mindful, focusing more on the philosophy and the asana practice, and a little bit less on the mantra for now, because I feel that it's a gentle like a gentle opening that is happening. In Dubai, 15 years ago, um, let's just say that, again, it was a gradual process of slowly educating people. I remember going on Dubai TV maybe 8 years ago and doing an interview where literally the anchor was asking me to explain yoga's origins. And it was like, okay, well, this comes from India and it's 5,000. This was their thing. It's like 5,000 years old and it comes from India. And, can you tell us a little bit more about it? And it was like this really sort of like, we think it comes from India and we think it's 5,000 years old. And can you tell us more? And, and it was so elementary, the discussion, around what yoga was at the time, and also to help people understand that yoga in its essence is one. It's one philosophy, but that we've had all these different offshoots of yoga: ashtanga, iyengar, hatha, and kundalini, and how there are different schools, different philosophical schools within yoga. So I remember that was really difficult for people to understand at the time, that yoga wasn't just one, it is one thing. And yet the experience of yoga can be quite different from school to school. So that was the first thing. So there was very basic education that in a way needed to take place at the time. The second thing was to educate people on the fact that there's no conflict with whatever their faith systems are, that yoga is really a system that is meant to help us come back to ourselves in its essence, and to be able to deliver and explain to people in a way that is amenable, that is somehow accessible in their own language and in their culture. And then it was baby steps. It was baby steps. It was like, maybe one center, quietly opening up with the mantras, a little bit below the radar initially, and then very slowly and gradually opening it up to the point where now, in Dubai anyway, I've opened up with mantras in festivals and closed with mantras. I am participating in a festival next week. It is in Abu Dhabi.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been asked actually to just be very mindful of any chanting practices that I bring into my session.
Right.
And there is a very strict code of conduct, which I have to review, but I can offer that.
Yeah. So while you have been careful about how you deliver the teachings and what you choose to deliver, even though it was illegal, it wasn't enforced. Did you feel danger by teaching yoga at any point or no?
There may have been a few instances where because there was so little education about what yoga was, it could have been construed as something else. Technically, in Dubai, we're not meant to come together in large groups for religious purposes. And if someone were looking at it from the outside and didn't have the education, they might misconceive it as something else. So there have been moments where maybe, one would want to be more mindful because something is perceived a certain way without the correct education.
Right.
So from that point of view, we've always been mindful.
Right.
Just mindful.
Right.
I would never, I'm always sensitive to the land,
Right.
sensitive to the people, not going out all guns blazing, being mindful of how we bring in the different spiritual traditions and mantras, the sacred texts and so forth. Just really, really being mindful of how that's brought in.
Yeah, that's a really good skill to develop as a teacher, because a younger, more naive teacher would think, well, this is part of the teachings, I'm just going to say it whatever the consequences. But I mean, it kind of makes sense that somebody would think like that, because sometimes when we think about lies, the opposite of truth, we are looking for truth, Saddam, right? So the opposite of truth being lies, and sometimes we say, well, there's lies by changing something and exaggerating something, but also by omission, by not saying something, we are lying. But in this context, it's not lying. It's about, look, these are the teachings, and how much can they take? How much are they ready to receive? I'm not going to force feed somebody, this is the teachings of yoga or Kundalini yoga. But it's about being mindful and develop that skill, sensitivity to know how much can I bring forward, and are they ready to receive it or not? Because it's not going to serve anyone to have a certain kind of conversation. And even if we are omitting something, it's not about like being, I don't know, it's like it's not a lie. I'm not lying. I'm just holding back. How much are they ready to receive? Okay, and now this is the moment. And so that's probably facilitated the place where you are right now, that you are more comfortable sharing, no?
100%. And it's what I call discernment.
Yeah.
Discernment.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, how can I discern? How can I assess? How can I be mindful without being without allowing fear to dictate or anything like that? So just always tuning in. Is this the right space? Is this the right space to be tuned in? Or is this the right space to bring in this aspect and that aspect? And with again with that with that presence, with that intuitive knowing that comes from tuning in all the time and asking, is this the right space? Sometimes the download is no, this is absolutely not the right space.
Right.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
And sometimes the download is, it's okay, go ahead, keep going, keep going, keep going.
Yeah. It would not serve anyone to just go in there in the space that is wrong space. And by having that discernment, you probably are making sure that the right space is created in the future, so that we can talk about mantras and how the prayer words in Islam are also mantras, and they have an effect on consciousness. But we can only have that conversation if they are ready to receive it, by creating this, through this discernment, creating that space. I like that you mentioned this discernment. I was meditating upon the Yoga Sutras last year. At the end of last year, I was doing a course on that. And Patanjali tells us that that's one of the highest skills, viveka, to get to samadhi, basically, and to reach a space where you can access the liberation. Viveka is one of the biggest skills that we have to develop, along with a few other two very important skills. But yeah, I can imagine how this discernment plays a big role teaching in Muslim communities. Yeah.
And I actually, when I work with teachers here and trainees, it is something that I talk about a lot. And I think it's a very unique context, because we're not in London or New York or Toronto or even Spain or Portugal. We're in Dubai, and things are changing fast. And even if things look the way that they do from the outside, very pristine and very possible, and it feels like, everything goes. I can hear the mosque right now, by the way. It's really an invitation to explore the subtle and to tune into what is not seen. And just because something is not so obvious all the time doesn't mean that we that we ignore it, right? So teaching teachers and trainees to have and maintain that subtlety, to use their both their heart and their mind, and to tune in to that intuitive space of, is this the right moment to bring this in? And that's how I've always worked with people here. And I would continue to encourage that, because it's still so fresh, so new, so fresh, so new, that it's not the place to, in my view, it's not the place to just kind of come out all guns blazing. Yeah.
I think that's a great place to develop that discernment. I was just thinking right now that it's curious. The way you're speaking is the kind of the same attitude I have with my uncles, for example. And because there is a lot of rejection in the past towards anything spiritual, kind of like yoga. So when you are, it's not that they reject the spirituality. And actually, one of my uncles was the first one to bring yoga to the family, but then he went away. But when we have to have a spiritual conversation in the family, you always have to have that discernment. How much can I bring in? And I think that any yogi and yogini will have experienced something like that, because especially in the family, there's often somebody who's going to be like having all these walls towards what you have to bring in. And you cannot bring this attitude, this same attitude. Can I have this discernment to know how much is it ready to this person to receive today? And they are actually not just ready to receive it and I'm going to spoon feed them, but it's like they are actually asking for it. They are willing to have that conversation. And so, okay, I'm happy to share. But otherwise, why do I need to go preaching? That's the difference, right? We are not preachers, we are teachers. And so if somebody wants to know and they are open and they are asking, we can share and still check how much they are open and how much they are asking. And that's important, not even just in the context of Muslim communities, but everywhere. Always be mindful and just teachers, not preachers. Right?
Yeah, attunement, that's the conscious communication,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
It's like what is being downloaded through me? Can I hear myself on the one hand? On the other hand, can I hear what's not said? Can I tune into the other in a way that is not just empathetic, but also tuned into them and tuned into where they are and tuned into the context and the wider space? And it's a constant listening, G. It has
Yeah.
to be. It
Yeah.
has to be. Because yeah, I mean, I love the context of family is a great one. It's a great one to bring up. I think when I first came into this practice and went deeper and decided to do the training all those years ago, of course, my family had a lot of questions. And I remember at the time taking a position that was very, just very quiet and only share when asked. And and not to attempt to try to prove anything, like I'm not out to prove anything. If somebody asks, fine. And several years went by before my family started to become curious and started to ask certain questions. And I remember that being a door opener when I think my parents really started to ask questions, and my dad asked to be. I remember once in one of my classes, and my mom did a practice with me. And several years after that, my brother saying to me, can you tell me a little bit more about why you wear the turban and when you practice? And eventually he asked to have an experience. And then finally, my sister, who came to her first retreat with me at least 8 years ago now. And at the end of the retreat, saying, now I know, now I know, now I understand. But how I never, throughout that period, attempted to push or persuade or convince of anything that I was doing, even though I knew that they all were asking very serious questions about, what is this turn that she's taken? She had this career in this, and now she's doing that. And we don't really understand. And now it's not even a conversation in my family. It just is. It just is, you know? But I can
So
imagine.
now that you're talking about your family as well, can I ask something a bit more personal? It might be a little bit sensitive, but you mentioned before that you were born in Palestine, and even though you grew up in Canada and UK and all that, um, you came back now to very close to that region as well, and knowing all the suffering and the difficult situation that they are having over there. I mean, what's your position really as a yogini and as a teacher in the region? How can you? I mean, first of all, what can one even do? Because certainly when we talk about yoga, for example, and we talk about doing the postures and doing the meditations, that's not when you are in the middle of a war zone, no, when you are in the middle of a live or die situation. So first, what can you even do apart from praying for your own community in a way, and I guess your family, because your family is going to be from there. And what's your attitude around the whole conflict of the region?
So, uh, three things come to mind immediately when you speak. The first is seva, the second is simran, and the third is sangat. So, in moments of crisis, and especially this year has been really, really horrendous with Gaza and the unraveling of what's happening in Palestine and Israel. It's the first thing is, uh, can I, Simran, can I remember my spiritual identity? Can I remember that I'm more than all of this? Can I remember that there's something bigger to tune into here? That's the first thing. The second thing is sangat, find like-minded souls who share who can support you during this difficult time, and who can relate to the light of your soul, not to your commotion, to your emotion, to your rage, to your anger, but to the essence of who you are. The third is seva. Find a space, know a space, be in a space where you can cultivate a giving spirit. Get out of the neuroses, get out of the rage, and figure out what those spaces are. If it means, turning your class into a seva, opening it up to the whole community free of charge, raising funds for causes, although here we have to be a little bit more careful how we raise funds, because that technically is illegal if it's not done through specific channels. But there are ways. And I think in order for us to be able to take that to the next level, so Seva Simran Sangat, we need to first work through those very difficult emotions, right? And not suppress them. So the first thing is, like, a lot of people that I know are either, including myself, I passed through it, very sad and very angry, and even a feeling of hopelessness. And what does that hopelessness do? What does that do to us? And there was a point about a year and a half ago, less than a year and a half ago, at the start of the conflict in Gaza, October 7th of last year, when I think for days I didn't sleep properly. I know people in Gaza, I know people in the West Bank, I have students and community in Palestine, I have extended family there. And it was like just image after image after image after image, WhatsApp message after WhatsApp message. And just the atrocities that were happening felt insurmountable. And it was at that time that, and I found myself a little bit going down a rabbit hole of, and at risk of becoming a little bit of a zombie in that hypnotic trance of just going through the news and just feeling so much rage and so much sadness that I couldn't feel anything anymore. I was just in this kind of, I was numbing with the scrolling, and it was just this feeling of like, and then realizing actually that the most important thing was to be attuned to the pain, be attuned to the anger, the rage, the sadness, and to also grieve, because I wasn't really giving myself permission to grieve as a yogi. Somehow there was like, oh, but can I give myself permission to grieve? But I need to see that, all of this is God, or all of this is the divine, or all of this is so much bigger, and always trying to tune into the bigger picture, but sometimes dispelling the emotion, the deeper emotion. So coming back, what I want to say is recognizing that I needed to acknowledge my feelings. Number one. Number two, not numb out. Number three, talk about it. Number four, work through it in such a way that meaningful action can be taken, whatever that meaningful action is. And that meaningful action might just be showing up to lead a class, showing up to hold space for others, showing up to create some kind of a fundraising opportunity to channel resources to people in need. Whatever it was, to continue to make space for that meaningful action. Talking about it, not ignoring it, not sweeping it under the carpet, not trying to make it go away, bringing it up in contexts that are appropriate. Not every context is appropriate, but bring it up in appropriate contexts. I had to also decide how to use my social media platform. It felt like an inferno, an inferno of just information and people just posting, serial posting. And I realized that actually, if I'm going to start using my social media channels in that way, that I'm just adding to an inferno.
Yeah.
And am I really going to be heard? Is that the place where I want to be heard, or are there other channels to be heard? So discernment was another one, is knowing that maybe the social media channels were not the right space to express myself, using more closed context for that, using classes, trainings, etc., to speak in different ways. Coming back, Seva, Simran, Sangat. What is around me? Who are the people around me? How am I dispelling my energy? Can I stay in the remembrance of my spiritual identity? Can I see that I'm so much more than this? As well as grieving what needed to be grieved and what continues to need to be grieved. From a psycho-spiritual point of view, I would say that it's a very interesting situation, because with grief, in order to we need to give ourselves space to grieve, right? But usually with grieving, it happens at the end of something. But this situation is ongoing. So there's no space to grieve. So actually the grieving is incomplete. And it's this constant state of grief that underlies everything, that is very, very, very difficult to tangibly understand. And sometimes I feel like, sing my prayers. It's like, sing my prayers, sing the prayer, open up, chant. So for myself, I chant, I use the practice, I cultivate a connection with the breath, I create spaces for people to exchange, to share both their grief, their rage, their anger, their sadness, their pain. And also, I look to cultivate meaningful channels for giving back in some way, so that we don't just become these bystanders of hopelessness. Because it's big. It really is. It's huge, but it's not, what is the word? I think just tangible, meaningful action. Find it, cultivate it, make it bigger, and make it yours, and keep focusing on that. And if you can focus on that with everything that you do in life, irrespective of what is going on, then that is somehow a victory. That's somehow a victory. But I'm not helping anybody if I'm depressed, if I'm not able to get up in the morning, if I'm struggling with my own anger. And I'm certainly not helping myself.
Wow, so many things when you said, yeah, meaningful action, but what action? Yeah, I was thinking as you were speaking how, we learn this in the level 2 about the cycle of stress, and how in stress we are, we are exposed to a circumstance in which we think we are in danger, and then we stress ourselves to try to get out of danger, fight or flight the lion, right? And then in nature, the lion disappears, and then you have months or years to recover before you face another lion. In our modern society, our mind believes there is dangers everywhere, and then we are creating this idea that my boss is a lion, and so we are constantly in a state of stress and we never come out of it. And we are always in feeling of danger because my wife is a lion, my boss is a lion, my children are a lion, and then we are in a constant state of stress. And I was having that circularity of the whole mechanism of stress being like a loop that carries on ever and ever faster, similar to the circularity of grief, as you were saying, which I guess is not very far away as well, because all these circumstances, surely there's a lot of PTSD as well. and it's called post-traumatic stress disorder. So the stress cycle is very much in play with the grief. So when you said that the grief doesn't have an opportunity to conclude because it's carrying on, it makes so much sense, because we know of these 5 stages of grief from the psycho-spiritual dimension, and anger is one of them. And so it makes sense. People are angry, and then there's been a loss, and maybe a lot of loss, and there's a suffering, and there is a pain, and you, even if you want to heal, there is first, some people are not going to want you to heal because they are angry and they want you to feel angry. But then, even if you want to complete your own cycle, how can it complete when there's another loss, and there's another loss, and there is something else lost? So that makes so much sense. So here comes the question: what action? When you are saying about action and the discernment, and I love something that you mentioned before, which is this: there is an inferno, and I'm having another thought now. I will just explore it in a moment. There is this inferno. When we talk in yoga about karma, karma is a fire. Even the word kar is like fiery, right? So con kar, that's 1, 2, 3. 3 is the fire. So there is this fire, and that can happen even in a family. There's sometimes some families are really karmic, and you can see there is a lot of anger within the family, and then there is trauma, and maybe one of the parents is abusing the child or whatever is happening, and the child may want to heal, but this is carrying on. So again, it's like this never stops. So how can I stop to grieve and heal? And maybe there's no chance. So from the point of view of karma, which action to do, it would be do the action that first of all, even before trying to stop anything, stop throwing wood into the fire. That's the first clue. Stop adding wood to the fire. So when you were talking about the inferno of social media, and you having to have, again, that viveka, that discernment to choose, how am I going to use this platform? I think it's really wise to say, well, I'm not going to add any more fire to the inferno. And I think that even before choosing what kind of action do I have to do next, first of all, stop adding any more wood to that. So that's, I feel like that's a very wise attitude, and that may take different forms for different people. But how can I stop adding wood? That's one thing. And the other thing is the witness, being the witness that you were mentioning, because that's a lot about also the spiritual path, and yoga is about becoming the witness, and notice that you are witnessing, and then witness the witness, right? But then what happens when the witness is witnessing something macabre, something horrific? Yeah? How can I step back and notice the witness when I'm witnessing those things? And that's part of like the play, like in the middle of a movie, and the whole drama is going in the scene and in the pictures, and then there's people dying in the movie, and then you are there, and then you forgot to eat your popcorn, and then realize, oh, I'm in a cinema. Only this is not a cinema. This is real life. This is happening. People are suffering. People are dying. And how can I stop the witness when I'm witnessing all this suffering? So that's wow. That's so many layers, and then feeling the fear and the anger, and witnessing your own anger, witnessing the anger in the others, and the fire wants to burn anything. My goodness.
And I think you touched on something really important, because on the one hand, we're the witness because we're not physically there, right? On the other hand, we are it. We are somehow in it. And, in it because, that's where I trace my roots, and there's a whole ancestral story there, and. And so it's layer upon layer upon layer upon layer. And somehow the challenge of it is to keep coming back, to see the seer, to come back into that place, into that yogic place, actually, which is all about developing our capacity to bear witness. Can I see? Can I see? Can I see? But before I see, can I feel? Can I feel? Can I feel? Right? And not denying that, because I think sometimes the yogic path is misunderstood. And because it's misunderstood, spiritual bypassing happens.
Right.
Risk of a spiritual bypass is extremely high.
Right.
And, oh, well, if this is God's work, then,
Yeah.
not like we're just holding space for this and just keep praying for peace and just keep praying, come back. But are we really denying our householder existence, right? This is a tightrope,
Right.
right? The yogic path is a tightrope between our finite existence as human beings, living in this human form, living in this life that we have chosen, and the infinite. So this wider infinite knowing, the Ek Onkar, there is something unseen that we can tap into and tune into. And we're constantly walking that tightrope. I call it a tightrope, the tightrope of the
Yes.
yogic path.
Yes.
You and I, G, we've chosen to be on this earthly path with children, and responsibilities as fathers, mothers, professionals, and so forth. We're not renunciates sitting in a cave in the Himalayas chanting Om or Ong or, just praying for the frequency of humanity to be upgraded. We are householders living in a human body, in a human form, carrying all of the emotions and passions that we do somehow, and choosing the yogic path. So, in a way, the yogic path is saying, come back, Simran, you are so much more than all of this, yes, but this doesn't mean we deny. This doesn't mean that we suppress. This doesn't mean that we bypass. So, how to be in the human experience and recognize that as yogis, we also have a duty to be socially active and not to completely turn a blind eye to the social and political realms of reality. So, what I do, what I create, is having a tangible, measurable impact on the wider community. What's happening in the wider community influences me. Do I turn a blind eye to what's happening in the wider community? No. I need to continue to find ways to create pockets of consciousness. And how do I do that? How do I help to create pockets and build pockets? Well, I do that by really taking ownership of my own personal space first and foremost. And that has a wider impact. So keep coming back, keep cleaning, keep clearing, keep making space, keep tuning in, keep finding and locating that attunement so that the tangible action gets clearer and clearer. And so I come back to say that we have a duty as yogis not to turn a blind eye, to be socially active, to speak our voice and to do it consciously, not to add more wood to the fire, to the inferno of mayhem and chaos, but to contribute something that is that maybe is different, without again having attachment to the outcome. So the yogic path is basically saying be, but at the same time, don't shy away from your responsibility as a human being in this life and towards your fellow human being.
Yeah. Wow. That's so important and such a challenge.
Such a challenge.
Such a challenge. And when the inferno is an inferno of words and you feel like removing wood from the fire, you feel it through silence. But then if I am just silent, do I just become a witness and I'm not taking responsibility? It's so tricky, so tricky.
So tricky. It's a tightrope. It is a tightrope because I'll give you an example.
I can see like the tightrope, like if I'm silent, I fall this way. If I'm speaking, I'm adding wood to the fire. So my goodness. Give the example, sorry.
There's a beautiful example of, we can, obviously, when we choose to live with a certain quality and caliber of consciousness, every single thing that we engage in, every single thing that we do, how we eat, all of it is having measurable impact, right? The quality of our breath, the quality of the food that we eat. But so I take it a step further. And for me, one way of making a difference is how do I invest my money? Where do I invest my money? Whatever, and when I say invest, I'm talking about the literal investment aspect of it, but also if I choose to buy clothing, where do I buy my clothing? Where do I buy my cup of tea? So for me, one way of making a difference is to really look at where something is produced, how it's produced, who's producing it. So, so boycotting and divesting and sanctioning companies that are supportive of, let's say, a certain outcome of war and atrocity is not something that I will do. But that requires my research, it requires my discernment, it requires my education, it requires having conversations, so that every time I spend, every time I buy, every time I look to invest in something, I'm doing it with a certain quality of consciousness, and that's impact. So that's one way of creating impact, is really literally bringing that conscious awareness into every single aspect of our lives. How we breathe, how we eat, how we purchase, how we invest. So that's been one way also that for me has been important. And we've seen actually throughout history how boycotts and divestments can create impact in South Africa, for example. Very peaceful way to create impact and to overthrow the system of apartheid.
Hari Darshan, thank you very much. I wish we could stay longer, but maybe we can meet some other time. This conversation could go on. Tell us how can people find you? And I will write down the socials later in the description of this video, but tell us.
So how can people find me? They can find me on my website. Actually, ongoing, they'll find me on social media. So Instagram, Nancy Zabani Life. So my first and last name, not there's my first and last name with life at the end. Also under Darshan Collective. We have a platform on Instagram called Darshan Collective. I have a podcast, which is in its early stages. So I am on Spotify, and you can find me there. And of course, websites and nancyzabani.com and darshan.ae. But I think the best thing is just to find me on Instagram.
Nice. So I will add this to the description of the video. Thank you very much. Thank you for the conversation, and thank you everyone watching. I hope you enjoyed and felt part of this conversation, and maybe you took something out of that. I took a lot of things, and the 5 pillars, the discernment, and how to approach the challenging situation in the Middle East. And there's so much we could carry on talking. Thank you, everyone. Until next time, Satnam.